Gregg Berhalter. Thank you guys for watching. Make sure to drop a like on the video. I'll see you in the next one. The USA is a very big and successful country. It's got the biggest military, the biggest economy, the best movies, the most Olympic gold medals, the most McDonald's locations per capita. Probably, I don't know, I didn't look it up. But one thing that they just can't seem to be successful in is football. No, not that football. Real football. Do not think that I'm about to let this bald fraud off the hook, but there are so many issues we have to get through. We'll get to him. We'll start with the fact that the MLS, Major League Soccer, is completely backwards. If you take the Premier League, for example, they have teams who have academies below them. Those academy players will start playing at a young age. They'll continue to play for free based on merit and how good they are. What is their talent level? And then with those players, they sometimes will get a stud, like Phil Foden from Manchester City, coming through the ranks, a player who's probably worth over $100 million right now, playing for their first team. They didn't have to spend a dime on him. Or players like Jadon Sancho, who came through the same academy, in which they were able to sell to Dortmund for millions and millions of pounds. Those millions and millions of pounds will fund the academy and also help with other transfers for the first team. It helps the club entirely, and it also encourages them to invest more money in their academy because they know that once they do get a star player, it will pay off for them. The USA, on the other hand, does things a little bit more terribly. Because instead of it just being based on merit and your talent level, it's also based on if you can afford to play or not, which shrinks the amount of players that you can choose from by quite a bit, because the amount that you have to pay to play here is about $2,500 on the low end, $5,000 on the high end, and that's just for one season. That's ridiculous. And on top of that, here's the kicker, it doesn't even include your uniform that you have to buy. It doesn't include any travel expenses because travel here is much further than most European countries. You're going to have away tournaments and away days in which you might have to buy a hotel room or you might have to spend a little bit of money on gas. It also doesn't include any extra scrimmages or elected tournaments that weren't included in the original dues. And so there's so many players that can't afford that, so your talent pool is going to shrink. Sure, you might still have some really good players that are in that talent pool, but imagine that if everybody could be considered for that talent pool. How many great players are left behind because they can't afford to play? So how many great young athletes end up choosing baseball or basketball or American football or cricket now? Apparently we're decent at that as well. Either way, this is where the problem originates. But just because the academies suck doesn't mean the top level has to suck as well. But it does. Major League Soccer is also completely backwards because there's no promotion and no relegation, which means that the teams that suck have no motivation to continue playing. They'll just try again next year. In fact, they're encouraged to finish last because if they finish last, that means they get the first super draft pick of the next year, which is basically choosing the best of all the college players here in the USA. It's not as influential in the MLS as it would be in like the NFL, where teams will literally lose on purpose so that they can get the first draft pick, but it's still completely backwards that would be even an encouragement to finish last in the first place. That's not the beautiful game. MLS does itself no favors though, because it has ridiculous rules behind the scenes as well, one of which is called discovery rights. I'll explain this to you like you're 11. Discovery rights is calling dibs. And that's basically it. I call dibs on this player. So I'll give you an example. Marco Reus is rumored to go to LA Galaxy this summer, but Charlotte FC called dibs on Marco Reus. So if LA Galaxy wants Marco Reus, they're going to have to pay Charlotte FC, a team who discovered Marco Reus despite Marco Reus making his professional debut 13 years before Charlotte FC was even a club. LA will have to pay them $350,000 to override the dibs. That is a legitimate scenario that is happening right now because the MLS is stupid. And this is where the bald fraud comes into our story, because with him comes a topic we've barely scraped the surface of, which is the culture of football here in the USA, which is now growing exponentially, more widely accepted and loved, and honestly, can actually view it on the television. When I grew up, it wasn't the case. You couldn't watch football on the TV. You weren't exposed to it, and if you played it as a boy, you were called names. You would be pushed towards other sports like baseball, basketball, and American football, which were considered manly in comparison to this sport in the USA. So a lot of people did fall into that societal peer pressure, a lot of which came from their own parents to stray them away from this sport, saying the women are meant to go play that sport. That's a girls' sport, which in turn is why the U.S. women's national team has been so much more successful than the U.S. men's national team. It hasn't been until the last decade, literally, in which it has been more accepted as a men's sport as well, and why boys aren't afraid to play this sport anymore. I speak from personal experience that I didn't see a single professional soccer match in my entire life until I was nearly 14 years old, when I just so happened to see the USA playing in the 2010 World Cup in South Africa. Before that, I hadn't seen a single second of professional football on the television screen or in person in my entire life, which not only stunts development, but also interest in the sport itself. But over this last decade, more and more Americans continue to break that pattern. They go to Europe, they play at high levels, and for the first time ever in U.S. men's national team history, all 11 starters for the team play in a top 5 league in Europe, many of which who are excelling in those leagues, like Christian Pulisic for Milan, Weston McKennie for Juventus, etc., all just to lose 5-1 to Colombia because our manager is completely incompetent. But I don't want to just blame Gregg Berhalter. That's a cop-out. It's also the U.S. Federation's fault for just rehiring him in the first place. They went on a coach search for 2 months looking for a new coach and just decided to, hey, let's just hire him back, despite the fact that he's only won 2 games in his entire tenure with the United States against teams out of the top 20 in the FIFA World Rankings. That's Mexico and Iran. Out of the other dozen that we've played, we've either drawn or lost against them, which is pretty embarrassing, and it just continues to go down that path as we lose 5-1 to Colombia. Now, I know that's an international, friendly. It's not really worth all that much, but it just shows that we're, going through Groundhog's Day, and we're just going to keep doing this over and over and over again with the best group of players that we've actually had as a country. And I'm not going to be delusional and say that this team of players should be beating France and beating Brazil and beating Argentina, but when you're getting absolutely embarrassed on home soil like that, how much longer do we take this? I mean, we're the USA, for God's sake. We should be at least trying to win, but our federation is just settling for this mediocrity that they've been used to for the last 50 years, and they don't have any ambition to go out and hire a coach that has any ambition and just doesn't blame his players after every single loss that we have. All right, but that's my rant over. Let me know your thoughts down in the comments below on what you think of U.S. soccer. Are we ever going to get any better? And if you did enjoy this video, don't forget to drop a like and subscribe. I'll see you in the next one. Peace out.